Hey guys, it's Jace of the Forestry Project. In today's video, I want to start breaking down geographic regions within the state, the Southeast, wherever you may be, so that then we can start looking at how to identify trees, what trees should be out there. I know we've talked about it in the Silvics Manual, but this is a way, instead of looking at individual trees, you can look more at forest tops and see historically what might have been there to kind of narrow down what you look at once you start getting to individual specific trees. Now, if you are a subscriber to the Forester's Gazette, our e-newsletter that we send out once a month, first I want to thank you very much for doing that. And if you haven't yet, I encourage you, head over to our website, enter your email, and subscribe to that. It's not some gimmicky thing that we're going to send you a bunch of spam email. That is once a month. And as part of that, it kind of keeps you up to date with what the Forestry Project has going on. We also list out what we plan for the future episodes of the videos, podcast, whatnot. And if you paid attention to that, you would see that today was supposed to be us building out our side-by-side to become kind of like a prescribed fire, wildland fire rig with a water tank and all of that stuff. Now, a few things, we're waiting on some parts to kind of connect everything together. And at the end of the day, I'm still a master's student, and I have to kind of focus on the thesis and stuff that it entails. So I've been spending a lot of time here lately up in Auburn at the school working on that side of stuff. So I haven't had much time to get home and be able to work on that much. So even if we do put out those schedules, for the time being, they may change a little bit as we go, but know that I am trying my best to kind of keep as close to that as I can. Now, let's get into geographic regions and discuss why they may be important to your land. So I had an assignment in my forest history class, and it was going over a write-up by Roland Harper made in the early 1900s, where he went through and documented each of these geographic regions. Now, we can split it up very broadly. If you look at the state of Alabama, you're going to have the Piedmont in kind of that northeast corner of the state, and then you're going to have the coastal plain that goes south. Now, what, as a landowner, should you consider with that? Well, the Piedmont is going to be a lot more rocky soil, whereas the coastal plain is going to be a lot more sandy soil. Now, there's a few other features as far as the Piedmont's going to have typically more topography, whereas the coastal plain is going to be more flatter and gently rolling hills instead of steep ravines, gorges, stuff like that that you see in the Piedmont. Now, if we look at that, we can get even more specific, and that is what Roland Harper does in his write-up. And that's what I kind of want to go through today and show you how you can look at that and let it kind of guide management. So this is the map that Roland Harper made as part of his economic write-up. And you can see a lot of different regions through here for the state. But if we look, regions 1 down around to regions 5 are all in the Piedmont, whereas anywhere down through here is kind of more the coastal plain. Now, if you want to break it apart a little bit more specifically, you also have the Black Belt in through here, which doesn't really favor either. It has very chalky soil, so only certain species grow there compared to other areas. But we can look at each of these subregions and see, now granted this is the early 1900s, but we can see what Roland Harper found in each of these regions to kind of look at what we might want on the land. Now, if you remember back to our Silvics Manual video, I was talking about how to use the Silvics Manual to determine what trees would grow out on your site. But that was individual trees. Now, we can look at that, and I went through how to look at associated forest cover types, and that would give you an idea of what other species you might want to consider with whatever species that you're researching. Now, how do you go about learning if you've never been on the property before and you have a general idea of where it is, how do you start determining what species are out there without having to go through each of the trees and find one that the range fits in your area that you want? Now you can go to this, and I'll include the link for this book in the comments to this video. You can go through and you can look at each of these subregions, and you can see county lines in behind there. So my land is a lot in the Walker County, Winston County line up here near Smith Lake, which at the time of this map, Smith Lake wasn't created yet. But we can look and see what region we're in, and then we can go to that specific region and start looking at the geology, topography, climate, and he also listed what trees were out there. So let's go. I'm going to be looking at 2B, which is the Coal Region Basin subregion. So let's look at what that actually tells us. Now here I've went in the book, I've went to the basin subregion, and it gives us a list of trees. Now an important thing to consider with this list of trees is some names changed. So this shortleaf, how do we know the difference? Well, we can look at the scientific name, and Tata is loblolly. So we know that this shortleaf is actually loblolly. That's what he meant by that. And you'll see this trend if you look at any historic stuff, especially the economics, what they were producing. A lot of times, just like they do today, when you go to Home Depot or whatnot, you don't see, in your softwoods, you don't see loblolly pine, longleaf pine, shortleaf pine, all in different areas. They're all combined. And most of that is going to be loblolly, just given the current status of the loblolly pine and how prominent it is. But historically, that would have been split up between these groups. Now, if we look over here at the numbers, we can see that some have went up and some have went down. Now, this is kind of a ratio of the trees that were out there based on historically what Harper thought was out there and then what he currently saw. So if we look at the longleaf pine, it went down, it decreased, which if we think about, historic logging and all that stuff, that makes sense. But you can also see where the loblolly increased, which we've talked about, wind dispersed seeds and they spread very rapidly. So again, that makes sense. But we can also look at all the tree species out there, and it gives us an idea of what to start looking for once we start getting out on the land and then getting into the Silvics Manual a little bit more specifically. So another really cool thing he done was he wrote down kind of where it was located. So say on your property you have, like our property, you have an upland area that you're trying to restore, and then you have a lowland area that you're trying to restore. So if we look at this, we can see that here you have dry uplands, you have cliffs, you have creek banks, bottoms, creeks and rivers, ravines. So sometimes what tree is out there may not be what the region would have had, but you can think about if you are, in Tennessee, you're probably not going to see a longleaf pine, whereas, if you're in Alabama, you're probably not going to see a northern conifer, like you take your eastern white pine, for instance. You're not going to see that much in Alabama unless they've planted it. So you can start to think about breaking down, is the tree that you think it is where it should be, and what is the likelihood that someone would have been in there and planted that? So if you're out on your property, and we've already showed you kind of how to look at the history of your property. So you've looked at the historic aerial images, you've looked at current images, and you see, generally what's out there. Then we can start looking into how likely was that area planted in the past. Now, if it's been more of an urban, or there was homes on it, you might find species that shouldn't be there. Whereas if you don't see much disturbance in the last, 50, 70 years, it may be a little bit more natural or native what's out there. Now, of course, in my woods, as you've seen in past videos, a lot of it's Chinese privet, and that is most certainly not native. And I do want to get into that in later times, talking about the difference between native, non-native, and invasive plants, because that can kind of determine your management, what you want out there, and things to consider. But if you're looking at starting to learn tree identification, instead of trying to think of all the trees that could be out on your property based on just every tree that grows, which you could never remember, we can start breaking it down by what grows in the U.S., what grows in the state, and then we can start looking at what grows in your region. Now, that again doesn't cover everything, but it covers a good part. You can also look at, once you've identified it, you can go in and look at the list of trees and see, should it be there, should it not? You can look at the range map and the Silvics Manual and kind of get that information. But looking at the geologic region of your area, or where your property is located, will help you start to determine kind of what trees should be out there, what trees to start looking for, and where to start actually getting your research for the property that you're trying to start managing. So with that, guys, I hope this helps. I know it's a little bit different than my typical videos, but again, in the office, I hope to get back out in the field soon and be able to finish up the side-by-side and show you that build, and I'm really looking forward to the content we have coming up in April. Again, if you have not yet, I encourage you, subscribe to our e-newsletter. It'll keep you up to date with everything the forestry project's got going on, what we're planning in the future, and kind of a little bit of status of where we are. And if you like this video, I encourage you, please share it with friends, family, whoever you think would get something out of it. And like and drop a comment in this video about where your land is located and maybe some of the interesting trees that you learned looking at this, because there was definitely some interesting stuff that I learned through reading about the region that my land was located in. Until next time, guys, happy management and God bless.